All right, welcome to Studies in Galatians. First of all, introduction to Galatians. The Galatians were either an ethnic group, and they represented Gauls who had conquered from their native territory in France to Asia Minor. And then they were separated from the ones in the West, and so the Gauls in Asia Minor were called Gallo-Grecians, and because they were living in lands that the Greeks were associated with, and that eventually became shortened to Galatians. So that's where the term comes from. But by the time Rome had conquered them, they were Galatia was also a province named after the Galatians. But the Galatians, as an ethnic group, lived in the northern part of Galatia. Now, traditionally, it was assumed that Paul was writing to the northern actual ethnic Galatians, but more recently, it's kind of been assumed and now holds preference that Paul was actually writing to the church that was located not in the north, but in the areas to the south in the province of Galatia, which these towns you'd be familiar with because they're in Scripture: Antioch, Lystra, and Iconium. So that is the view that is held now. It also lines up much better with Acts and Paul's travels. If he ministered in northern Galatia, that's about 300 kilometers out of his way from the other ministry that he did. So anyway, that's the common view held now, that Galatians is making reference to not the ethnic group of Galatians that were kind of more in the north, but Galatia as a province, and the areas of Antioch, Lystra, and Iconium, those places that we know Paul planted churches. So, introduction to Galatians, the dating of Galatians. There's not much to give us a clear understanding of when this letter was written, although if the visit referenced in Galatians 2 is the Jerusalem Council, which many people believe it is, and we'll talk about that more in another week, then probably Galatians was written around AD 58. And I don't give a whole lot of credence to this, but much modern scholarship questions authorships of many of the books in the New Testament. But even the most critical scholars generally hold that Paul did in fact write Galatians. When it was written and where it was written is much more a matter of conjecture, and so it's possible it was written in Corinth during the time that Acts 18 was written, Antioch, as seen in Acts 18:22, or Ephesus, Acts 19, or finally Macedonia, Acts 21-3. There are people who spill a lot of ink over that, but that's a real secondary issue, the exact timing of the reading of the writing of this document. So we see in Galatians 1:1-5, we have the initial greeting. Greek letters began with the sender. We saw this in the writings of Peter, but it's true in the writings of Paul as well. And we see right at the beginning, Paul identifies himself as an apostle, not sent by men, but by Jesus. And this is important, as we're going to learn very quickly in the letter of Galatians, that his authority was being questioned. And so he asserts right in the introduction that he is an apostle, first of all, and that he's not an apostle sent by men, because just in case you don't know this, apostle means a sent one, or one that is called, not called by men, but by Jesus and the Father, who raised him from the dead. And so here we see we're already getting a hint at what the theme of Galatians is going to be. Galatians 1, 6-9 gives us the purpose of the letter. Rather than beginning with praising some aspect of the church, as he does in other letters, he immediately turns to the theme of the letter, which is that the Galatians were rejecting the gospel. They were turning away from the gospel of Jesus Christ and turning to another gospel. And really, in these first few verses, Paul is making it very clear there is no other gospel. And that if anyone preaches a different gospel, whether it be themselves or another human being or even an angel, the gospel cannot be changed. And Paul doesn't just say it once, he repeats himself, there is no other gospel. And so then in verse 10, we see that it's really a transition that's going to bring us into the next section of Galatians that we will look at next week.